and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup, back from wherever, just taking a week off, and thankful to Marin Johns for sitting in. Marin, you did a great job, and you too with her.
We are thankful to Marin. Do you want the good news or the bad news first?
Go ahead.
The bad news is that two Trump judges have overturned bans on conversion therapy in Florida.
And this is both bad and good news. The internet lit up this week as Rachel Maddow got personal about her ordeal of almost losing her longtime partner, Susan McCullough, to COVID. Susan, I think, is on the road to recovery, so that's the good part.
And trans women were murdered this week in Houston and in Miami. And a trans activist, Ashley Diamond, is being tortured in a Georgia prison.
Again. In 1968, IBM fired a computer pioneer when she was transitioning. This fall, 52 years later, they surprised her with an apology.
It was nice. We lost New York Mayor David Dinkins, who was a leader on LGBT and AIDS issues in the early 1990s.
And you wrote a very moving obit of him and comprehensive for Gay City News, Andy. We can refer people to that.
We will.
We also lost the extremely famous but controversial transgender pioneer Jan Morris, who died at the age of 94.
The winner of the Man Booker Prize for Literature is a gay Scot for his debut novel.
And in the wacky news stories, a Brazilian man who bombed a film studio over a gay Jesus film is seeking asylum in Russia after his arrest.
His arrest over there. World AIDS Day is December the 1st, and there are lots of online commemorations that you can join. And if you are watching the show live with us on Facebook on Wednesday, you can tune in to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and see the Lesbian and Gay Big Apple Marching Band. And since we're all in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we will remind you that you can also help us out if you're grateful to us for the show by going to our website, gayusatv.org, and you can make a donation, and it would help us get through the next year. This has been a pretty tough one.
I'm sorry the marching band has to go out in the rain tomorrow. I assume their performance is live, not pre-taped, the forecast for Thanksgiving.
Not sure how all that is working.
Well, they talk about it as a one-block event instead of several miles, so I assume they're doing it live, but we shall see.
Well, let's get that bad news out of the way. In Florida, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, they struck down two bans on conversion therapy, which have been proliferating all over the country and in some states, in this case in Boca Raton and Palm Beach County. It was a 2-1 decision by Trump judges, Britt Grant and Barbara Lagoa. Remember that name? She was the runner-up to Amy Coney Barrett for the U.S. Supreme Court. And they ruled that the laws that regulate talk therapy are subject to the same strict scrutiny applied to laws that restrict political speech. Which is really appalling to the American Psychological Association, which says, hello, this is how we do our work. This is conduct. Anyway, the dissenter cited medical consensus against conversion therapy as harmful and unethical. And Shannon Minter, the attorney, said that they may seek an en banc review in the 11th Circuit and thinks the Supreme Court would uphold these laws. The plaintiffs in these cases were right-wing Christians who said that their clients want to suppress their homosexual expression. And the judges were really kind of, what's the word I want to use? They were perverse. They said the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual considered homosexuality a mental disorder in the past, and it would have been wrong to ban counseling that affirmed it. Well, let me tell you something.
No, that's not true.
Well,
that's totally backwards.
But let me tell you, back in the day when it was listed as a mental illness, I had friends who were studying to be therapists or were therapists in those days, and they were strictly forbidden from affirming homosexuality, which was a mental illness. A friend of mine, when he would do the counseling and he was being recorded, he'd turn the tape recorder off and turn to the people and say, "There's nothing wrong with it." But professionally in those days, it was considered an illness. Anyway.
Well, the point is that the argument here is between what the therapists claim is their free speech rights and the right of governments or medical associations or whatever to condemn harmful practices and outlaw them. And that's the argument we're having. And these judges who are Trump appointees and right wingers came down on the side of calling this free speech, but the rest of us think they are doing harm and that you're allowed to outlaw harmful practices.
Let's talk about politics. I have to get your perspective on all that's going on, Ann. We missed you last week. It was lovely to talk to Marin.
Yeah.
I was very depressed this week to read that in terms of state legislatures, well, in 2010, when we did very badly, Republicans controlled 54 of 99 state legislatures. Now they control 61 of 99. And that's, of course, going to let them draw the lines for the U.S. House and for themselves for the next 10 years. But in New York, just yesterday, because they're still counting the ballots in New York, we now have supermajorities for Democrats in both houses of the state legislature, which puts Governor Cuomo on notice. He can be a moderate sometimes, that he can be overridden if necessary.
Well, this whole business of the Democrats losing down ballot races is a little confounding to me. I know all these races are local, that you can't sort of take it as a judgment nationally, but it's disturbing that the public would throw out more Democrats from the House and put more Republicans in, fail to throw out many of these Republican senators we thought we were going to beat. It's discouraging.
Well, it was discouraging, but understand that Republicans controlled most of the state legislatures, so the lines that the state legislators were running on were lines that they drew for themselves, the Republicans, and they're very hard to overcome. They were overcome in Virginia. We overcame it in some of the House races. These were districts drawn by Republicans to be safe Republican districts, and in 2018 especially, we overcame them.
But then we lost ground, and we didn't win a lot of those Senate seats that are statewide that have nothing to do with drawing district lines.
Well, they do have to do with Republican-controlled legislatures because they do so much voter suppression and eliminate
in
our
general.
votes.
Yes.
Right.
Well, there was a little good news in this question we've been looking at for some weeks now, ever since the election, on the LGBT vote presidentially. A new poll. There seem to be new polls every week as we meet. Well, GLAAD has published a new poll that was done of 800 registered voters. They only 654 of them actually voted. It was an online research panel that had been chosen demographically, but that found that 81% of those in this poll voted for Biden and 14% for Trump. These are all LGBTQ voters. So that's a little more heartening.
Well, yes, that exit poll by Edison Research that alarmed everybody because it said Trump's vote went up from 14% to 28%. They initially said, we talked to 1,000 LGBTQ people. Well, no, they didn't. It was about 250. Which really makes it small.
Well, none of these are huge polls, and none of them are, entirely scientific because of that.
I was thinking maybe we're going to have one of these LGBTQ Trump supporters on here because they used to hawk us after the last election, and I said you only got 14%. But and we hear from you occasionally from the
not so much lately.
Not so well. Yeah. All right.
I'm heartened to see, you probably know the commentator who's on MSNBC at least a lot, Jason Johnson, black man, teaches at, where does he teach? Somewhere at a Southern university, I think. And I saw him the other day talking about something I've heard you talk about, which is the need for a new constitution.
Yeah, sure.
That changes a lot of these procedures, electoral college and others.
I mean, especially after this election. And again, it's not over in the sense that, Trump is still going out there to meet with Republican legislators and
he's still appointing judges.
Yes, and getting them confirmed by Mitch.
Yes.
All that stuff is still going on. But I'm talking about the arcane procedures for how things are certified and how electors are selected, all that crap. Clean it up. It's 2020.
Well, I am happy to see some people beginning to use the treason word about Trump. I'm also struck by the fact that, we used to say early on with him that he was very lucky not to have encountered some dire emergency that would challenge him, a war, for instance. Well, along comes the pandemic, and guess what? It reveals him as totally incompetent. Which we have been waiting for years. And that may have been what finally got him out of there. But he is profoundly incompetent, evil, and criminal. Where do you stand on the idea of prosecuting him?
I'm appalled that people, including Biden, are apparently whispering about we have to bring everybody together, which means ignoring what he did. You will never restore the respect for the rule of law, which is being shoved down our throats all the time about, when we demonstrate in the streets and everything, we're expected to. Obviously, it's imposed mainly on people of color, et cetera. The letter of the law, you've got to do it at the top to have respect for law. And again, if whatever he does and his pardons, and now he's going to pardon Mike Flynn, all these pardons and everything. Tish James was on Samantha Bee, laughing it up and talking about how she's continuing with all her suits. And Samantha Bee was going like this, please, because you can't pardon state crimes. Only people like Andrew Cuomo can do that.
Well, I'm theoretically highly in favor of prosecuting him, but my concern is that none of his crimes are going to be things that make an impact on the public, that people are going to say, oh, please, so he messed with his taxes or whatever.
That's how they got Al Capone.
I understand that, but Al Capone was out shooting people in the middle of Fifth Avenue. And Trump, to our knowledge so far, was not. And I think unless you can nail him for something really simply egregious and clear to the American people, that they're not going to get behind a prosecution of him.
Well, it's up to a jury of his peers.
Well, I worry that if we go after him in the same way we failed to nail him on the Russia investigation, my fear is that we will fail to nail him on this, and it will only increase his legend and his popularity. And that would be the reason I would not let the Justice Department do what they can do, but I'm concerned.
We need another Russia investigation, and Rachel Maddow has been all over it. If you've watched her lately, she's talking about this thing where, we have these surveillance planes that are allowed to go over Russia, inspect things in terms of buildup and troop buildups, just like Trump did with the post office. He's having the planes dismantled and trashed. And she's calling, NBC is calling every department, Defense Department, this department, State Department, and they're all referring it, and nobody's talking to anybody. And it's just being done while we're sitting here. So that,
well, they can send out new ones. Are these old U-2s from the 60s?
They are literally burning the place. You said he was going to burn the White House down.
Yes, I did.
And
I'm still waiting. There's still time for that.
We may have to burn the White House down. I have advised Joe and Jill, don't go in there for 14 days. Those germs. I'm not kidding. Give them a chance to die down and get.
There could be all sorts of booby traps left in the White House.
And the doorknobs and coughing all over everything.
Well, I'm happy to see that Karine Jean-Pierre will be Kamala Harris's chief of staff as vice president.
Out lesbian, very, very sharp. That's great.
Yeah.
And it's great that Kamala's hiring people like that who aren't just, and
who are more radical than she.
And speaking of Rachel Maddow, what a story this week. She gave us an extraordinary story about caring for her partner of 21 years, Susan Mikula.
I'm guessing.
Okay, Mikula, very ill with COVID, thought they might lose her. And she called Susan the center of her life, the organizing principle of her life. And she said she would kill for her or die for her without hesitation. But now Susan is on the mend now. But and then Rachel did something great, because she said, no, what, and I'm going to read this: whatever you think of your own life and however much risk you're willing to take for yourself, that's not how this works. What you need to know is that whoever is the most important person in your life, whoever you most love and most care for and most cherish in the world, that's the person you may lose, if you don't take precautions, is what she's saying. Or who you might spend weeks up all night freaking out about and calling doctors all over the place and all over again. So, these people, the hospitals are filling up. What you're doing, folks, if you're not taking precautions, there's not going to be room for anybody. There aren't ICU beds. There aren't places to put people. Christ, I just read that the bodies from April in New York are still in freezer trucks. Some
of them, yeah.
Just unbelievable. So,
and it's all of this is beyond the horror and terror and just desperate sadness of all of this. People's irresponsibility is just delaying our getting out of it.
I will say it again. When you think of the way the right wing screamed at us over AIDS and our irresponsible sexual behavior, and they wanted us all locked up and put in camps. They are just. This is my freedom to spread this virus far and wide. All right. More Biden stuff. 100 faith leaders and non-believers were included, sent a letter to Biden advocating religious freedom for everybody. And that includes not as an excuse to club gay people or ban Muslims. And it also advocates for an interesting concept, the separation of church and state.
Well, we'll see how.
I'm going to include a link to that with all the names on it.
Okay. Lovely. Impact zero.
Well, what do you think about speaking of impact, what do you think about the evolution of the Salvation Army? We've always been highly critical of them.
Yes. And what we were reading this week were some notes online suggesting that the Salvation Army may have progressed, that in their desperate attempt to fix their image, that they are putting out all sorts of things about how friendly they are to LGBT people in their provision of services, in their hiring practices, in their benefits. So there are notes going around saying, is this real? How deep is this?
It's all over their website. About all these things are very prominently displayed about giving equal benefits and things to same-sex couples who work for them and opposite sex. So,
well, the question I haven't heard answered yet that was raised was, what is the Salvation Army's policy on conversion therapy? Are they looking to convert people, both LGBT people and stopping trans people? If we could get an answer to that, it would go a long way.
Very true. All I will say is, it's more than you're going to get out of the Catholic Church or Agudath Israel or any of those groups.
Well, and as an ex of mine used to say, it's all relatives.
Yes. How about
Which
that?
I think is an apropos statement for Thanksgiving weekend. The thing that has me worried at the moment is this new case out of Indiana that may be going to the Supreme Court. We have worried, I have worried at least, I have said since the beginning of all these Supreme Court nominations from Trump that we could lose marriage equality. And I think you have poo-pooed this, but I don't want to.
Have
I think so, but that's not what's important. We can make a bet on it. But here comes this case from Indiana. 8 lesbian couples some years ago sued for parental rights on birth certificates of their children born from sperm donors into these lesbian couples. And they said, look, if a heterosexual couple has a child by the woman getting pregnant with a sperm donation, the husband, who is not the biological father, is presumed to be the father on the birth certificates all over the country. That's just a standard thing that, and even in adoption, they will put both names on the birth certificate as the parents of the child. Because parents on a birth certificate do not have to do necessarily with a biological connection. It has to do with who is raising this child, who are the child's parents.
And we have a lot of court decisions affirming that for same-sex couples, but
yes,
they've changed.
Yes, but in Indiana, some lesbian couples went to court a few years ago to assert their rights to be treated equally to heterosexual couples with their children born from sperm donations. And the court waited 3 years to make a decision on this. They just delayed. They just ignored it. For 3 years, these couples waited for a decision from these right-wing judges. And finally, the judges had to admit that, in fact, there were these precedents and that they did have a right to equal rights, as stated in the Obergefell Supreme Court marriage decision, that same-sex couples have a right to have their marriages regarded on a completely equal footing with heterosexual marriages. So they said, finally, yes, you have this right to have your children, have both women acknowledged as parents on the birth certificate. Well, now that these, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett have been installed on the Supreme Court, the state of Indiana is appealing this decision to the Supreme Court.
Well, it's not just the new judges. I mean, it's Alito and Thomas who have signaled that they want to fix.
Yes. Well, the 3 new ones with Alito and Thomas now make up this solid right-wing majority.
Is hostile to Obergefell as well, has been.
Well, he's been hostile to a lot of things and switched to balance the court. So the fear now is that this Indiana case will go to the Supreme Court, that they will accept it because they've given some signals that they might, and that this could be the first chunk of Obergefell to be chipped away and open the door to.
I mean, Indiana, the Attorney General there, I think it's him, trying to say there's no biological connection to the other woman. Well, in some cases, of course, there actually is, because, one contributed the eggs, the other one carried the child. Is that not a biological? Well,
there's no biological connection from the husbands of women who receive sperm donations, and that has not stopped any of those husbands from being declared the father on the birth certificates. It's not about. Yeah. The point is, it's not about a biological connection. It's about who are the parents of the child.
Right. There's always an assumption in law when a woman has a child and she is married to a man that he is the father.
Yes.
Law. It's like Charles and Diana, to get into the crown a little bit. I mean, You're talking about Harry? Yes, of course. Looks just like James Hewitt. They haven't really gone into that.
I did finally watch the entire Crown from start to finish in about 6 days. Four seasons, 40 episodes.
What a family.
It didn't make me like them.
One of our viewers,
except maybe Princess Margaret.
One of our viewers in London I think I said this on the show. I mean, he says, I've always been a monarchist, but after the first 2 episodes of this season, I'm reconsidering.
I got turned off long before then.
Anyway, Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage did a whole thing this week saying, we're plotting to get the right case to go up there to Amy Coney Barrett, who we called the perfect pick for the High Court. such an endorsement. So we are deeply concerned about what they're going to do to our rights. All right.
And we were afraid of her for years. You know, her name had been up there for years, and we'd sort of scoffed and said, oh, she's far too right wing. They'll never get her on the court. And boom, there she is.
Well, all right. All right.
And Susan Collins is reputedly now hates the Human Rights Campaign for not supporting her.
She feels wounded. Look, I said about the Human Rights Campaign a long time ago, because they always tried to support Republicans if they could. I said, you're contributing to the majority there. That's killing us. And speaking of which, the Georgia Senate races, we're reading that QAnon is upset because, the Republicans aren't standing up for Trump strong enough. So there's a hope that some of them will stay away from the election, but it's going to be a hard fight. Everybody is in it. I know people working on it, trying to go down there, sending letters, blah, blah. It's I'm not going to say it's everything, but it would certainly help Biden confirm his entire cabinet if we can get those 50 votes. And it's possible. All right.
We'll see. All right. Again, sad news, as we have every week, of trans women in particular turning up murdered around the country.
Yes.
First, from Houston, Texas, Asia Foster, 22 years old. 22 years old.
She's a client of the Montrose Grace Place drop-in center for LGBTQ homeless youth. And she was shot dead and found dead in the street. A candlelight vigil was held for her on Sunday. Crime is under investigation, but multiple gunshot wounds, just terrible. And in Florida, in Miami, a trans performer, Uni Carey Herrera, Uni Carey she was known as, 39, was stabbed to death by her husband, Igor Aruda Souza, 28, in their apartment. Now, she was a Cuban-born salsa dancer, pageant star, and LGBTQ activist, but police said the husband was on meth. He was charged with second-degree murder. She was the first woman to change the gender marker on her Cuban passport to match her gender identity.
And then, much to our horror, a story showed up from Georgia this week of Ashley Diamond. Wait a second. Yes. We had talked about Ashley Diamond some years ago. She was in prison in Georgia, a trans woman who was so abused in the system, misgendered, of course, put in a man's section of the prison, raped, harassed, horribly abused. And she sued and she won 5 years ago. And she got out of prison. The system was supposed to change, new rules for how to treat trans prisoners, all of this. Well, then she got put back in on a parole violation recently, and they did the exact same thing to her. She is, again, in the men's unit. She deprived of any hormone treatments,
sexually raped 14 times in the last year.
Unbelievable, horrible abuse.
The Center for Constitutional Rights and the Southern Poverty Law Center have filed a civil rights suit on her behalf. She tried to take her own life. She tried to self-castrate. It's just horrendous. All right, tell us about Born to Be.
Wait, I just wanted to, there are a couple of other murders that we found out about that happened a little while ago. In Augusta, Georgia, gender non-conforming Scott Lynn Kelly DeVore was murdered in March, and that's just come to light. She was 51. A suspect has been arrested. And in Cleveland, Ohio, in August, in jail, Leah Rayshon Day, 28 years old, a Black trans woman, was found dead, and that case is still under investigation.
Yes, by the way, the gun control groups, a bunch of them put together a report, and they said 3/4 of the trans people killed are being killed with guns. 76% of trans homicide victims since 2017 are Black. Trans homicides in the South are 5 times higher than in the West. There were, since 2017, 14 in Texas, 13 in Florida, 10 in Louisiana.
We tell these stories every week and mourn these people and express our outrage and our dismay at these murders. But I'm not sure that much as we try to, we fully convey the humanity of these individual people and the lives lost. And one way to get a better handle on this is to look at this documentary that you and Marin talked about very movingly, I thought, last week. It's a new documentary called Born to Be, and it looks at the trans surgery unit at Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York City, and specifically Dr. Jess Ting, who is a chief surgeon there. You may have seen him and their work on the I Am Jazz series that ran for a few years. That's where Jazz had her surgery. And the documentary is very complex, I think. A lot of brings a lot more of the real life experience into it from both the surgeon's perspective and the client's perspective. And it's available online in various forums now. And we tried to show the trailer last week and had a little technical difficulty. So we thought we would go ahead and show you this week the trailer of the new documentary, Born to Be.
Human beings are complex, and everything, including gender, is represented by diversity.
You're fighting every day. You're fighting to be who you are. You're fighting to feel comfortable in your own skin.
And that's just like at home. And then you have to go outside and you have to like fight a whole nother battle.
When you see yourself, what do you see that maybe you'd be interested in changing? Not every patient wants to have a surgical transition. You might just change your hair color, your makeup, the way you dress. You don't have to have surgery. I see a subset of the transgender population, only those patients who desire transitional surgery.
Goodbye to this face.
She has this internal image of herself that is very mismatched to her external appearance, and we're just going to make her external face and her internal identity match.
It's going to bring more to the table. It's going to bring a lot to the table, baby. Oh, yes.
You mean if they call today, they won't get an appointment for a year?
They'll get on a waiting list.
How could there be 400 patients? Oh my God, we need so much help.
Insurance is giving me a hard time about some of the notes. Not medically necessary, cosmetic, defer, deny, delay.
I had to cancel 2 vaginoplasty cases because I was deathly ill. And if we cancel them, how are we going to find time to do that surgery? We're booked 6 months in advance. Remember, this is a work in progress.
Oh my gosh. And I love it, and I love it, and I love it, and I love it, and I love it.
There isn't a way for surgeons to learn now. There's no formalized training program. There are no standards. This is a new operation. We're inventing this. You're pioneering.
It's amazing, Dr. Ting.
I'm ready.
Nervous?
Yeah. Are you?
I deserve a healthy and happy life just as anyone else does.
I can't express how happy I am.
I'm very, very grateful to have you here.
Born to Be, highly recommended documentary. Find it.
Very, very, very brave people, all of them, the doctor and the patients.
And another piece of good news for trans people in New York City, longtime activist Cayenne Doroshow of Glitz, gays and lesbians living in a transgender space, or I'm not getting that completely right, but she opened an LGBT housing facility in Queens this week, and that's good news.
And better late than never, the story of Lynn Conway. Now, Lynn, who is in her 80s now, was a tech trailblazer and a trans pioneer who transitioned in 1968 while she was working for IBM. And she was already a star. But what's the guy's name who ran the place?
Thomas Watson Jr.
Yes. They couldn't have it. It's too disruptive. And they let her go, but she eventually found her way. She was a science whiz, computer science whiz, went on to work at Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center. I mean, by the way, if you're using a computer now, you owe a debt of gratitude to Lynn Conway for the innovations that she developed over her career. She was famous. So, she was invited to a forum with IBM where they said they were going to celebrate her life. 1,200 people got in on the Zoom call as they were doing this, and they apologized to her. She was not expecting that. And it's just quite moving, overwhelmed her. Better late than never.
Well, absolutely. And I think we're going to find that, hold on, let me just check something here.
Well, I'm going to link to her amazing story in the...
She transitioned before Jan Morris, who we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
Oh, yes. Oh, and I mean, she said at the time, there was basically Christine Jorgensen and me.
Yeah.
In terms of...
And her coworkers tried to help her and tried to keep her there. And it was only because Watson, who ran the company, objected that she got
disruptive.
Yeah.
All right.
In New York City, there was a rally and march for LGBT asylum seekers at the Stonewall Inn.
Our friend Dafe Okoro.
Okoro, yes, exactly.
Yes, and he runs a shelter for LGBTQ asylum seekers.
In Tacoma, Washington, a 15-year-old and their parents are suing Blue Cross for excluding trans care in, wait for it, Catholic Health Initiatives Franciscan, their plan. They say it violates the Affordable Care Act. The mother works at, hold on, I just had it, St. Michael Medical Center, but the plan of this Catholic institution excludes trans care for family members, so they're suing.
Well, better news from USA Gymnastics. They've adopted a trans-inclusive policy. And speaking of righting past wrongs, Joaquin Castro and David Cicilline have introduced a bill in Congress requiring the State Department to review the cases of personnel fired during the Lavender Scare of the 1950s and 60s. More than 1,000 were purged, LGBT people at the State Department. They're calling it LOVE, the Lavender Offense Victim Exoneration Act. And it's, well, all right.
Let's move on to David Dinkins.
Oh, right, David. Well, David Dinkins was the mayor of New York from 1990 to 1993. And we'd had 12 years of Ed Koch and neglect on AIDS. ACT UP had been founded. There was a lot of militancy to get rid of Ed Koch. And he ran in the primary, and David ran, and a bunch of other people ran, but David won that primary big. And, he came at a time of racial unrest, but what people, we remember him for is getting things done around AIDS education, for instance. We were pressing at the Board of Education for an explicit AIDS education program, and he got behind it. And that included condom availability in the schools. So it really saved a lot of lives. Now, on the issue of domestic partners, he had kind of promised he was going to come in and just settle the suit with gay teachers and give everybody benefits. But he said, there's not enough money, this kind of stuff. But he did establish a domestic partner registry, one of the first ones in the country, so that everybody could register. And if you worked for a firm that gave domestic partner benefits, it was a way of validating it. And he finally settled the gay teacher suit on the final days of his administration. Right before the election, and that gave everybody the benefits. But St. Patrick's Day, this I think was his finest hour.
And not mentioned in any of the obituaries I've read, except for yours.
Oh, they have Patrick Gaspard, our former ambassador to South Africa, saying, who worked with David, they threw a beer can at him. Well, where? It was at the St. Patrick's Day parade when he was standing up for gays. So here's it's a long story. The Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization, 1991, Irish LGBTQ immigrant group. They just want to march on the St. Patrick's Day parade. So they apply and they get back a letter saying, well, you can't march. The city won't let us we'll put you on a waiting list. So Dinkins said, because we can't have too many. So Dinkins said, well, if it's just a waiting list and you want me to extend the parade, I'll extend the parade. And they said, no, we don't like gays. We're a Catholic parade. Go away. So a lot of negotiations ensued, and they found a liberal part of the Ancient Order of Hibernians who said, we'll take them. And you can march. And David Dinkins stood with this gay group. They couldn't march with their own banner, but everybody knew they were there. And we're going to show you film right now of what happened when they marched with David Dinkins.
Get used to it! We're Irish! We're queer! Get used to it! We're Irish! We're queer! Get used to it! How are you going to use AIDS? How are you going to use AIDS?
What it is about is our lives. It's not just about sex, it's about loving and caring for other people and being accepted by your families and community for who you are and standing up and saying, we're not going to take this no more.
What's disgusting is that we're not allowed to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with the Irish in New York. That's what's disgusting.
We're gay and Irish, we won't be beaten. You bet your life we will march again.
That was Tarlac McNeilis, who died of COVID earlier this year, who I think at the end there. What you heard, if you were just listening to the podcast, was a lot of vitriol. But David wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times after that and said, I stood up for civil rights for my own people, Black people, but I was assaulted by a mob in New York for standing up for gay and lesbian people. And it really was his proudest moment. He was kind enough to make me a city human rights commissioner during the administration. I have a little picture of that back in the day, back in 1990. He was somebody who listened to us, at least. We had to fight with him sometimes over AIDS policy and even how the other thing he did is he upheld the boycott of the St. Patrick's Day parade, which subsequent mayors like Bloomberg and Giuliani, of course, and even Senators Clinton and Schumer did not honor. And then Mayor de Blasio honored it and finally got lavender and green into the St. Patrick's Day parade 25 years later.
And thank you to Lisa Guido for that video. She shot that all those years ago, and it's stunning video.
Right. And things have changed, including within the Irish community.
All right. Well, small note in San Francisco, the Stud Bar, legendary bar, closed, but people are more upset by the fact that the owner, in selling it, painted over the murals that had been on the outside.
Somebody painted Black Lives Matter over it. Nice to see that the chief U.S. district judge for D.C. came down hard on all the horrible right-wing things, the purges that are happening at the Voice of America. It's not a particularly gay story, but it's a story about journalism.
And as the Methodist Church continues to fight over us, there's a new breakaway grassroots organization, Liberation Methodist Connection, spelled with an X, LGBTQIA two-spirit affirming. Good luck to you.
We want to note the passing of a neighbor of ours in Chelsea, Frederick Weston, a gay artist and PWA, 73. He's died. He worked with visual aids. He learned that he had AIDS in 1996. He was living in an SRO, but eventually got into Penn South, which is a nice development here. Did lots of male erotic art, including mixed media Body Map 1. I think it's safe to show here on our show. Samuel Delaney, the author, called him a much less known Keith Haring. He experienced discrimination early on, trying to work in the fashion field, and he died with his next solo show on the horizon.
Well, he achieved renown late in life after working as at a concession stand at a porn theater, doing coat check at gay bars. He really was impoverished for many years, but has only recently been recognized as a superb artist. Right. Also getting recognition, the New York City Parks Department is naming a couple of things: James Baldwin Lawn, Langston Hughes Playground. No mention of gay in any of those announcements.
Didn't hear any of it at the dedications.
Yeah. And a University of Michigan study of 518 gay and bisexual men using hookup apps found that in the midst of the pandemic, they're having more sex, more drinking, and more drugs. They are so deluded, they think you get COVID from kissing, but not from sex. The fact that two bodies are in close contact sweating makes no difference to them. And they also think that my partners are not dangerous, only yours. All right, we're running out of time. Let's hopscotch international news.
Jan Morris has died at 94 in Wales, transgender pioneer. She was a British journalist, travel writer, historian, Everest covered.
Well, famous for accompanying Edmund Hillary part of the way up Everest.
And Tenzing Norgay.
Yes.
But eventually decided to transition in 1972 at the age of 46. And wrote a book about it called Conundrum, appeared on the Dick Cavett show to talk about it. She said that she realized that she was a girl when she was 3 or 4 years old. But she was famous as a travel writer, but she had some controversial views about what it was to be a woman.
Sure, and the whole story was huge at the time. I remember it vividly. She had been married to a woman and they divorced. They had 5 kids, but they remained together. And eventually, when it became legal, became civil partners.
Well, because they legally had to divorce when she became a woman in British law, which was crazy.
Yeah. She wasn't allowed to transition without divorcing, I think.
Right. Jan Morris. All right.
In Switzerland, the European Court of Human Rights says deportation of a gay man to Gambia would violate the European Convention on Human Rights. Torture, they called it, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. India, court hearings on marriage are going to be heard soon. In Thailand, the protesters against the government are continuing to press for same-sex marriage among their demands.
In Belgium, the regions of Brussels and Wallonia have closed down their offices in Warsaw over the Polish threat to judicial and media independence and its anti-LGBTQ discrimination.
Oh, P.S. a correction from earlier in the show. The news about Karine Jean-Pierre was premature. Someone who put that out about her being Kamala's chief of staff was looking at something earlier from the campaign, not current. So hold off on that for the administration. In Germany, the cabinet has approved clearing the records and making payments to LGBT soldiers who were discriminated against in the 20th century. LGBT activists say it's a good start, but not enough. You're not really taking into account everything they lost by being fired or losing promotions or whatever.
In France, we read about the death of Daniel Cordier, one of the last surviving members of the French resistance. Got a picture of him when he's young. And recently, he died at the age of 100. He was raised right-wing and anti-Semitic, but what he saw of Nazism offended him enough to become a resistance fighter and change. After the war, he became an art dealer. Didn't come out as gay until 2009. But he realized
at 89.
But he realized he was attracted to boys when he was in, boarding school.
In Singapore, which, as we know, is very restrictive, Prime Minister Lee says he welcomes LGBT people, but he's not going to push for a repeal of the criminalization of homosexuality. One thing at a time.
I don't read many novels these days, but I'm intrigued by this. The winner of the Man Booker Prize for Literature went to out-gay Scottish writer Douglas Stewart, 44 years old, we have a picture of him, for his debut novel, Shuggie Bain, about a gay boy's coming of age in working class Glasgow in the 1980s. I've tried to watch some of these things online, interviews, but of course the accents. But actually, he worked in New York for 20 years in fashion for Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren and things. And then he wrote a novel that was about 900 pages, which they've boiled down to this award-winning novel.
Well, it's autobiographical. And the Man Booker Prize judges called it challenging, intimate, gripping, daring. Anybody who reads it will never feel the same. And that's quite a review.
They were unanimous, which they rarely are. Yeah.
And quick.
Right.
In London, they've erected statues of two lesbian pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. They were Caribbean pirates and presumed to be lovers. They've erected this Execution Docks. Do you know that place?
No.
I'd show you a picture, but they're so weird, these statues, that you can't make head nor tail of them.
Google it. In Russia, a Brazilian man, Eduardo Fauci, who threw Molotov cocktails at a movie studio that made a comedy about Jesus, bringing his boyfriend home to meet the family. He was arrested in Moscow because he was being tracked by Interpol in September. Now he's seeking asylum in Russia, saying if he's returned to Brazil, his life will be threatened by the extremist gay community. The lawyer says these gays are involved with drug trafficking. The film was titled The First Temptation of Christ.
All right, we have about 5 to 6 minutes to do AIDS news and entertainment news. December 1st, World AIDS Day. Lots of different celebrations, online performances.
We will list them. We will list them in our email for you.
Okay, that's a good
Broadway
idea.
Cares has something that I think sounds like fun. So you got to sign up for our email list. Go to gayusatv.org.
Yes, and a new CDC report says HIV death rates are down by half, but less so in women and people of color and young people and people in the South. So do the math.
World Health Organization says that remdesivir, the AIDS drug, has no meaningful effect on mortality for COVID patients. Gilead objects.
And the Red Hot organization is reissuing its original fundraising album. They've been at this for 30 years. The one with all the stars singing Cole Porter songs. That should be cool. All right, entertainment news. I caught the Hallmark gay movie, The Christmas House. Two brothers come home for Christmas, one with a male partner, the other searching for love with women. The gay couple is fully integrated into this. I'm not sure the word gay was used. On the other hand, I'm not sure they kissed either. But there are a couple waiting for news of an adoption. I won't give the spoiler. It's perfectly predictable and inoffensive. The Christmas House.
I want to wish a happy 80th birthday to our friend Arnie Kantrowitz on Thanksgiving Day. He was in the original Gay Activists Alliance, and he wrote the book Under the Rainbow, an early gay memoir, an English professor. And the pick we have is with his husband, Larry Mass, who wrote the first articles about AIDS in the world, and Kelsey Louie of GMHC.
Yeah, Arnie on the left. And congratulations to Dan Levy, who is one of People's Sexiest Men Alive, and to Billy Porter, who's going to direct his first feature, What If? It's a high school production. Christine Vachon is one of the producers, which is nice. And Billy's been lobbying the Emmys for diversity. That's along with a group of other people.
And as long as we're doing 80th birthdays, my friend Anthony Halbert, who we've had on the show a couple of times, turned 80 this past weekend. The picture of there is him with Marion Williams, who won Kennedy Center honors, because Tony produced gospel records, but he also wrote about German refugees, and he wrote The Gospel Sound, and Thomas Mann era some literature. So happy birthday, Tony.
And fingers crossed, I'm looking forward to seeing the Kristen Stewart lesbian Christmas movie, Happiest Season, which is airing now on Hulu. It got good reviews. I'm shocked that any of these movies would get good reviews. But then I'm shocked that Kristen Stewart would be in a Christmas movie.
Is this with Victor Garber as the daddy?
Yes,
oh,
yes. Yeah. Her girlfriend's dad and Mary Steenburgen.
Oh, right.
They're the parents of the closeted girlfriend who's afraid to come out to them. And Mary Steenburgen evidently makes a few anti-LGBT remarks, presumably before she embraces the lesbian couple. But then
we need a story arc.
I'm fantasizing.
So Ann, you're ready for your COVID vaccine?
Yes, I am ready for that. I want it because I want to be able to travel. You know, I've been perfectly content staying safe at home or venturing out safely. But I am looking forward to freedom for everybody with the vaccines. I'm very eager for that.
Did you talk to Dr. Fauci about it this week? Weren't you on a program with him?
The TAG Awards, everything was pre-recorded, all the segments. So no, I did not talk to him, but he gave a very interesting little acceptance speech that I then tried to get publicized more widely, where he talked about the influence of working with AIDS activists over the years.
Will they make it available to us?
It is available. If you go to tag.org, I think, or treatment action group, you will find the awards and Tony Fauci's acceptance.
I will look for it, and if I find it, I will link to it in our email. Go to gayusatv.org, and you can sign up for our email. You can also make a donation if you like. We have a little click for that as well, which we would appreciate, so we can keep going and doing this for a little while longer.
We do appreciate all of your support and letters and emails. It's really nice. And so that is what we are thankful for at this time of year.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We're down to our last 8 seconds. Thanks for being with us, taking time to be with us. And we hope to see you next week.
See you then.
Bye-bye.